Hello, everyone. We're here with Lucy Holden, who is a journalist and author of a new book called Lucid. And she's going to talk to us about the writing of the book and her life and her experience of therapy. So, Lucy, I thought we'd start with your thoughts about why you wanted to write a book about the last decade of your life, which has been variable in what's happened to you and in your way of dealing with it. So you can perhaps better start with what has the last decade of your life been like?
Sure. So I wanted to. I've got Lucid here, actually.
Good.
This is what it looks like. If anyone's interested. I'm 32 now, and the book starts when I'm about 23. I've just graduated. It's essentially, like you said, it's a bit of a ride. It's about me leaving university, one of many overqualified grads in a depleted job market in London, trying to make it, basically. And so whilst the story, I think, of our 20s in general is not unique in the sense that it's a time where we're all trying to work out who we are and what we want our careers and love lives to look like, I did feel that the way my generation has been made to grow up did create quite a unique situation. Housing markets had affected things, the way that we live now, renting extremely expensive, less chance for most of us to get on the housing ladder, creating higher anxiety, and the job market, the recession, all of that cauldron of things. So I guess that I wanted to write Lucid because, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, writing is my way of working out how I feel about things. Largely, I find it in general easier to write than to speak about my emotions. So at least I know I'm in the right career, I guess. That's one thing. But I also wanted to write something that I would have really liked to read at the age I was when the book starts. There are millennial memoirs are quite it's a crowded market in some ways, but I didn't read. Still yet to read one that I really associated with. I find in general the genre can lean towards quite a fluffy kind of structure and be quite aspirational, which is great, and everyone's experiences are different, but I didn't find that those books reflected my own experience. And my own experience was one of quite a, on the surface, glamorous lifestyle, with the Times newspaper were training me straight after university. In the very beginning, I had a house of friends, and I was in a committed relationship, relatively long term for my generation at 3 years. And I kind of had it all, as it were. But I, beneath that, had a sense that I was struggling, essentially. It was partly, I think, to do with my job. But like I said, that cauldron of things affecting how we live now that were beginning to get to me. So it's not a self-help book by any stretch, but and my generation has many flaws, but I think our strength is in not being silent. And part of my cause for that being my main kind of driver, I guess, if you like, now, is that I spent a lot of my 20s being quite silent about the things that happened to me. And I wanted to change that.
You mean that you weren't talking to people and telling them what you really felt?
Yes, I think I squashed for quite a long time an introverted side. I became quite good at performing, partly because it's what I had to do at work to get a story as a news reporter. But also in my personal life, I'd been blocking my emotions for quite a long time. The book is supposed to be many things, and I hope one of the things is light and funny, but there is some darkness in it.
It is light and funny.
Thank
at
you.
times. Absolutely.
I'm glad. Yeah. So whilst everything was going, great on the surface, I had been blocking for a long time the fact that I'd been sexually assaulted when I was 21 at a New Year's Eve party, and it was so blocked. I really didn't believe it had happened to me in many respects. And so my 20s were spent just kind of running away from the past and pretty much any emotion which I felt worried would put me back to something that had not happened to me. And I guess that's why they went so fast, why I forced them to travel at such a speed. But also it meant that this trauma, which I had experienced, was bubbling away. And I think being the decider about a lot of, it was the decider in a lot of factors in how I chose to live, really, kind of having quite a hedonistic or excessive lifestyle, drinking a lot and using those kind of surface level blockers to kind of make myself feel better. And it wasn't until the pandemic, when I escaped a very bad relationship and came back and sought therapy, that I was able to talk about that for the first time. So
talking to the therapist was the thing that got you to actually identify what had happened 10 years before.
It was, no, that's not strictly. What happened was, in 2018, I was sent as a part of for a job to Madeira and Turin to investigate the claims made against Ronaldo, the footballer, obviously, that he had assaulted a nightclub manager in Vegas years before. And I went to that job without much second thought, to be honest. This was kind of my method. I didn't really think about what I was doing until I was doing it a lot of the time. And I'm sure in hindsight that was possibly some kind of coping mechanism. Also a result of a very fast life in which I didn't give myself enough time to think about what I was doing until it was happening. So on that job, when I was charged with asking fans what they thought about the allegations, and they were historic allegations, that was the first time that I really thought, like, Jesus, I don't like the word victim, but, you know, for want of a easier one right now, I am a victim of historic sexual assault. And it wasn't this epiphany that the plane landed back in London and I told everyone I knew, but it was something that had kind of really forced itself into my consciousness. And I'm quite sure that was just a matter of time. And I think it was probably a coincidence that job was given to me because I was a woman, and they wanted to know particularly what female fans thought about the allegations. It turned out they didn't really care. So that was devastating. But yeah, it was in therapy that I began to unravel how that event had affected me for the first time. I was able to say the words after the Ronaldo trip, but I still didn't really understand or have any kind of, I used to want to be a psychologist. So I've read a huge number of books on it, but when it came to analyzing myself, and I found I was too close. So I really needed a kind of help in recognizing how it had affected me, and particularly my relationships with men in my 20s.
So really you are being treated for post-traumatic stress.
Yes. Yeah. My therapist, who was a psychotherapist, diagnosed informally PTSD. He diagnosed two kinds, which was really fun, which was the PTSD from the historic situation, and more recent PTSD, because the relationship I'd left in London had spiraled into a domestic violence situation, which I was shocked to realize I had no idea I was in this sounds ridiculous, but I didn't realize it was a domestic violence situation, because I didn't know about coercive control until I had left it. And it was physical and emotional abuse, but so yeah, I had a double whammy, and that really was a huge lesson to me, that I should have got therapy years and years ago, because it was what my therapist described essentially as a logjam of emotion, because I had never confronted anything. I was doing it all in one go in a pandemic.
Yeah, and how does it make you in terms of future relationships?
A little bit cagey, to be honest. I feel very strong now that relationship's 2 years past. I mean, I really was a wreck after that. I felt like I'd been in a car crash. And it took me a while to get to kind of remember who I was, when I kind of, I think those relationships work by taking away quite a lot of your identity and leaving you with a huge amount of self-doubt and things, but I feel very strong, but I feel extremely happy single, which is also a kind of plus of the pandemic, because I was forced to stay single. And another of my past coping mechanisms was to just jump from one relationship ending to another one beginning, because I don't think I knew how to be on my own. But I have now learnt to be on my own, so I'm very happy. But I think it would be dishonest to imply that that wasn't at least partly because I do not want to have to, be in another relationship and deal with all of the ups and downs of it just yet. I don't quite feel ready for that, maybe.
Are you still seeing a therapist, Lucy?
I'm not currently, no. I did 18 months with my therapist, which felt a good stint. We did cover a lot. It's a tricky one, just deciding or trying to work out at what point you can end, because I do believe that most people would benefit from having therapy, for years and years and years. But to be quite honest, I did find it tricky. In the pandemic, when nothing was happening, it was very easy for me to commit to a weekly hour at the same time. And I understand completely why therapists need you to commit to that. But when life resumed, I found that my own lifestyle, my former lifestyle, in some ways came back. So as a freelance journalist, I don't know when I'm going to next be asked to work or where. And I'm still kind of between London and Bath. So it's my therapist needed 4 weeks notice. So I decided to have a break so that I could work out if I was going to move back to London, then great, but I would probably look for a therapist in London. And I've never been good at routine, which is possibly why didn't seek therapy in the past, apart from the cost of it in London, which was not great. But I could afford a therapist in Bath. That was the highlight of coming home. But that was something that has jarred with me. I don't know if you or anyone else knows of a solution to that for people who can't commit to a specific hour. Is there a kind of protocol?
I imagine that something will come along fairly soon that will mean that people, because it's a service, isn't it, therapy? And I think that in the end, people who use it need to be able to ask for what works for them. But I don't know yet. I think even the fact of doing Zoom calls has been a big change for therapists. And I think it's been great for lots of people, and lots of therapists have been surprised. So that's been quite good. And how does it feel having the book out? Everyone's excited when they have a book coming out, but I would think you might have felt a little bit apprehensive about how people were going to welcome it.
Yes, there's some dark and difficult themes in there, for sure. I actually found that the publicity campaign made me more nervous, and that was because I love the newspaper trade, but they do like a dark tale. So I found, and I knew that the editors that I worked with and for would focus on those darker bits. So ironically, I actually felt relieved when it came out, because I knew that you agree too. It's many things, and it's not there are harrowing moments, and I think that if you get through life without seeing any darkness, you've done amazingly. But the reality is that most of us have to face something at some time, regardless of what that is. So I felt relieved it being in people's hands and knowing that people would make up their own minds. I kind of had to confront a long time ago in the writing process, because it was just after I'd come back from London and was having therapy and dealing with the trauma of my historic and recent past that I got the book deal. So when I was writing it, I was not that okay, but it also massively helped. And I had to, at that time, confront the fact that I don't think it's possible to write anything which everyone is going to love, or everyone is going to love every bit of. It's essentially we all read with our own kind of I don't know what the right word is, but our own kind of vision or our own experiences color how we see and watch and hear everything. So I had to let go of the fact that I think it's physically impossible to write a book that everyone is going to think is brilliant. So once I'd done that, then that was a bit of a load off.
Yeah. And what about individual readers' responses? Have you had people tell you how they felt about it?
Yeah, I have some interesting ones. They break into three things, which I think are they break into three groups, I guess. Firstly, I've been surprised by how, because I was very worried that because of my own experiences, and this is probably part of the problem with where our society looks at all of these things, putting it on the woman. I was very worried that talking about the issues I was talking about would reflect me as quite an anti-man type. And I'm really not anti-man at all. I'm just anti-3 men, and they are in the book. But I was really, really pleased to have such great feedback from male readers, really just completely on side with it. I'm told people laugh as much as they cry. I think that kind of hit list, isn't it? It shouldn't be in some ways, but for all TV execs and editors everywhere probably ask themselves, if people laugh and cry, you've done something right. It's probably the general consensus. But yeah, lots of it was quite difficult in that you become a kind of sounding board for other people's pain. And so I think it's actually an honor to be, and I'm sure, I'm talking to a community of therapists here, I'm sure you guys would agree, but to be trusted with information or other people's stories, I really did. It made me really emotional, partly because I felt so, honored is probably the right word, that they would tell me what they were telling me. It was very upsetting to understand the frequency of the situations, especially the coercive control aspect of. I had messages from lots of men who recognized that their sister had been in a similar situation, or their mother, and sisters of women still in the relationships who couldn't quite see it yet for what it was they felt. And so, it's tough. It showed me a kind of slightly bleak vision, but also so much positivity. There was one woman who said that she'd left her abusive relationship 3 weeks ago, and she would read, keep reading and reading the bits so she could remind herself that she should not ever go back. And that's kind of what you do it for, at the risk of sounding like a complete martyr. You just hope that laying out what it's been like for you will help one person understand that they don't need to put up with a similar thing, or that it will help one person realize their situation for what it is. And so it seems to be working in that respect. The reactions of friends have been interesting. I was quite worried that a lot of people would say, why didn't you tell me, and kind of put it on themselves. Which I think most people have been trying not to do and have largely succeeded. But there is, I felt I was being treated with kid gloves for a week or so, but it's gone back to normal now. And I think it's a normal reaction, isn't it? If you hear about something awful that's happened to your friend or a relation, and you know that you weren't there at the time because the person wasn't able to tell you what was happening, then of course there's some level of guilt is maybe normal. But I've just tried to say that it wasn't until I could learn to talk about it that I would have been able to tell them anyway.
Do you feel at all that you may have been under the sort of sway of a kind of culture of women, and mostly women, being expected to be party girls, really kind of up for whatever, that this is part of the kind of 21st century liberation, anything goes, whatever, your sexual enjoyment or your work enjoyment or whatever that you want. Therefore, if you were being less than that, like reflective or feeling a bit like you didn't particularly want to see people or go out for, at night or whatever, did you ever feel that there was a kind of judgment over your generation that really triggered that kind of behavior?
Yeah, I think it's got something to do with it, definitely. I would describe it as I think it's as much a self-judgment as feeling a societal judgment or a generational judgment. I think the truth is my generation spends a lot of the time absolutely exhausted from what we believe we need to do, which is go to the 6 a.m. basically to be everything all of the time, to be, Instagram beautiful, and to go to make those 6 a.m. spin classes or whatever. I've never done one of those in my life, can I just stress? But to make the early gym classes, then be at your desk and then impress all of your bosses and work the overtime, and then also keep your love life rotating via apps which make it all throwawayable if you're single, or keep your relationship happy and thriving whilst you're dieting, and therefore have no patience for relationship. Everything is kind of battling with each other all of the time. And yeah, I think that it's hugely pressurizing. That's on top of, I hate the acronyms, but I do believe FOMO is a really real thing. And I think it was a release for a lot of people, the pandemic, in some ways. I mean, obviously no one had a good time in any respect, but we were suddenly let off the hook when it came to FOMO because no one could do anything. And I think it was the first time that a lot of people actually sat down and just breathed and just gave themselves a moment, or as my therapist would have said, just learn to just be was his big thing. And I had been under the impression that what you did was who you were, and I kind of wasn't really aware that I could just sit and think, hence why I had so much blocked emotion about my entire life.
No, I think that's really interesting. What would you say are the things that you have adopted, the changes that you have adopted in that, as a result of this, as a result of having the 2 years of just being and finding out what, a kind of isolated Lucy Holden is like. I mean, COVID isolated. But, what does it mean in your future, would you say? In the next decade to her?
I think I did have somebody asked me the other day, why would you consider coming back to London are you not worried that you would go straight back to your former quite chaotic self and lifestyle? And I was, and I am a little bit still, but when I talked to my therapist about that, he said that one integral thing would have changed if I went back. And I said, what? And he said, well, you obviously. And I do think that I'm different. I feel that I understand myself much better. I understand that I have as much a kind of, I come across as extremely extrovert, and most people think I'm extremely confident all of the time, but I'm actually have a real introverted side, and I really like quiet. I occasionally love going to bed very early, and I read a lot. And if I don't have that time or give myself that time, I do have the propensity to kind of run away, or I've learned, I hope that I have learned to say no as much as I like to be able to say yes. And yeah, I'm calmer. I think it's easier to be calmer and easier to be when you have been able to go back via therapy or whatever method people are able to do that in, and see your life with some perspective, your life so far. Mine is still pretty young in the grand scheme of things, but just even writing about a decade and learning, it was my whole life, but seeing it on the page, and especially going over it, the number of times I always say to people, it's like writing a diary, but reading it again and again and again and again, because of the edits, drafts you need to do to make a book. And it's really cemented in my mind now how things led, kind of the domino effect of things. I didn't see certain things as connected before I was able to be helped to see them like that. I think I was much too close to see kind of, how my decisions like ricocheted through my 20s. And so I feel more confident going back. I think the clarity of the understanding is much, quite a lot of it, I think. I hope anyway.
So if you could, what would you like to tell your 21-year-old self about what is going to be happening in the next decade to her?
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely could have. No, do you know what? I think I would choose to address my younger self. And I would firstly just like her to know that she was going to be all right, because there have been times when I really wondered if I would be. And I would like to have known that I could talk about what happened without, I think if I'd been able to address that initial trauma at 21, then I would have saved don't get me wrong, I don't think I've lost the love of my life or anything in my 20s, but I think that I put myself quite needlessly through a lot of relationships which were wrong, because I was asking men to kind of, in some ways, mop up the damage of what another one had done unfairly, but perhaps with some justification. But also I felt safer around men, ironically, and I couldn't be single or on my own because I didn't want to be with myself. So I think I wonder who I'd have been if I'd have been able to address things earlier on. I think I think my love life definitely would have been easier. But I feel happy now with where it's gone, but I don't like the idea that I couldn't have got here without people hurting me along the route. I think it's a difficult one. It's mainly just, I would like to have known that I would have been okay and that I could get through it. I used to be quite scared of my own mind. I used to dislike it. I think if you have a history of mental health in your family in any respect, in mine there's a history of depression. Low mood freaked me out because I thought, am I the next one to have this or this? And it was in therapy that I again learned that low mood doesn't have to be feared. I could, no one feels great all the time, and that kind of balance. I think living with more of a balance in my 20s would have really helped me.
Yeah, that's really great, Lucy. I think you've written a really interesting book, and I think lots of people, particularly young women, will get some good lessons out of it. But as you say, men as well.
Yeah,
because it does involve them both, as does life. But thank you very much for talking to us, and I hope the book does well. Okay.
Thanks, Louise. Bye.